week we analyzed the Queen's Indian defense, something we'll continue with in this week's episode as well. In our previous episode we analyzed the basics within the opening, and today we'll finish off a loose thread, namely the line which follows after bishop to b4 check and bishop to d2 in this position. Black can now choose between quite a lot of different moves, and among them are bishop takes on d2 check, a5, queen to e7, and bishop to e7. Bishop takes on d2 check is the simplest and most popular choice, and white answers by recapturing with the queen. To take back with the knight is possible, and it might be considered preferable to recapturing with the queen, but that's not true since the knight is better placed on c3 than on d2, and because of this, the recapture with the knight is usually avoided. Black castle kingside now, and for those who believe this to be a boring and static position from which nothing can happen, I'll show you a variation which proves the opposite. Because if black after knight to c3 is to play knight to e4, and if white now plays queen to c2 followed by black taking the knight on c3, white can instead of recapturing on c3 play knight to g5. Black is to play. He has two pieces hanging and white threatens to checkmate in one move. But to his advantage, he's a piece up, and both the knight on g5 and the bishop on g2 are unguarded. So what should black do here? Well, black stands before two choices. Either he plays knight to e4, or black plays queen takes on g5. After knight to e4, white can choose to take it with either the knight or the bishop. It might seem as if knight takes on e4 is a bad choice, since black can pin the knight by playing f5. But white can escape his troubles with knight to f6 check, followed by rook takes on f6 and bishop takes on b7, giving white a rook for a bishop. Instead of f5, trying to pin the knight, black is fine after knight to c6. The other possible move, bishop takes on e4, can seem as the more tempting option, since it gives white the rook for a piece, even without black blundering. Because black doesn't want to lose his h7 pawn, black has to exchange bishops on e4, after which white threatens both the same old checkmate on h7 and the rook on a8. Obviously, black gives up the rook by taking the knight on g5, and after white takes on a8, black plays knight to c6. This position is very complicated, and even though white has a material advantage, the position is still equal because of the inactive white pieces compared to the fairly active black pieces. If we go back a bit and return to the position before black's knight to e4, we see the other possible option, queen takes on g5. If black does this, white's next move, bishop takes on b7, is as well as forced, and against this, black takes on e2 with the knight. This seemingly unnecessary sacrifice is played since the knight really can't go anywhere else. So instead of passively waiting for white to take it, black gets a pawn for the knight. White shouldn't take the rook now, but recapture the knight, since it otherwise could capture on d4, causing a lot of trouble for white. So after queen takes on e2, black develops the knight to c6, and now white can take on a8, exchanging the bishop for a rook. The difference between this line and the line which followed after knight to e4 and bishop takes on e4 is that black has gotten a pawn more in the exchange, but for this extra pawn, white has bought freedom for his queen. It really isn't interesting to see how the game would progress from here, but as white you'll have to be extra careful not to let too many pawns go, since that can lead to terrible consequences. So before we end this week's episode, I want you all to remember that tactics are a part of the game. And even though the position might seem calm and collected, simple moves like queen to c2 and knight takes on c3 can lead to a position where you have to tread very carefully. I'll be back again next week with more on the Queen's Indian, so see you then.